I mean, the funny one is I really would say it's attribution. Years and years,
There's
everyone's like,
nothing funny about that.
if so and solved attribution, everyone says they would be so rich, everyone would use it. And it's, we solved attribution probably like 4 or 5 years ago. We
Yeah.
just now finally figured out how do we activate that data or how do we make it useful for our clients. So we went and we solved it. And then, we started to, install it and like, okay, here's the data. And then everyone's like, well, this is great. What do I do with it? And I was like, well, you guys said if I got this, you'd buy it? And so we realized that like, okay, it isn't just solving attribution, but the good thing is that was a lot of work and a lot of foundation that we had to build to get us to where we are today. And we couldn't be where we are today without building that foundation. But I will say like, hey, we solved attribution. And then it was, well, now what?
This season, we are going to interview a number of very talented people out in the multifamily space from all different lenses, be it asset managers, owners, operators, marketing professionals, etc. His name is Robert Lee. He is the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Hyly.AI. Let's say over a decade ago, he was part of the origin story of what is Hyly.AI today. The founder and CEO, Munish Gandhi, enlisted Robert, as I understand, to help create the company that you know today. So we're going to dig into that origin story. We're going to talk about discovery. We're going to talk about decision machines. We're going to talk about intelligence fabric. And we're going to talk about a plethora of other things. But what we're really doing is taking all the education that we put together in season 1 and in season 2, and then building a framework around that for season 3, where we're going to ask for feedback from the community. We're going to talk about what happens in a Monday morning meeting and unpack that, not Robert and I, but the community at large. And we're going to talk about how Hyly fits into that ecosystem, how we're part of creating and driving a new category in the multifamily space called intelligence fabric, but also tease what is next after the intelligence fabric. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
It's Friday. We're recording on a Friday, so that's a little added pressure, I suppose, or relief, one or the other.
Yeah, a little bit. Friday's when you can find some good time to dive in.
Yeah, that's 100% right. Well, speaking of diving right in, I'd like to do just that. And if we could, I think it would be interesting for our viewers and our listeners to understand the origin story of Hyly. So if you could take us back to the beginning, unpack it a little bit. What did Munish see at the time? I know you were in the early innings, so maybe what you saw at the time that kind of got Hyly started.
Yeah. Well, I say many people probably do know, but not everyone probably does know this fact. But I started in leasing. So I was at Bozzuto, I had started in leasing, then started, managing properties, opening properties. But through that, I was always like, man, our technology is a little rough. And Munish got connected with, some folks at Bozzuto. And basically they're like, hey, like, we've got a problem with how the data is in the industry that like we cannot send emails, we can't schedule appointments, like it's just not, we just can't do it. So ultimately, even though, Manish came in to kind of develop some products for the industry, it was really a data problem we were solving from the beginning. So they spent some time on that and, getting that going. So
Got it.
probably,
Was there sort of a specific when you first met Munish and the two of you started to collaborate, was there sort of an aha moment where the two of you, your brains collided and you're like, oh yeah, this seems like a product and we can definitely make it something that's fruitful for the industry?
yeah, well, I always had a passion for real estate and multifamily, so that's kind of why I got into it. But I also, at heart, am a entrepreneur and a problem solver. So when Munish and I kind of connected and we started to kind of collaborate on what are the problems we can solve or what can we do, it kind of became a moment of, well, we could keep solving problems and keep building. There's tons of problems to solve for the industry and really dive in deep, solve the hard problems that no one's solving, and grow a business.
So to that point, and to your point about, hey, there are many, many, many problems that we could solve. How do you choose between what looks super interesting and it's super hard and boy would that be fun to develop versus, hey, this is practical. People can actually make use of that. Let's do that instead.
That's a good one, because it's fun to chase any and every problem that gets thrown at you. We really have a focus of collaborating and working with our partners. And when we hear the same pain point coming from, multiple of our partners, it's that becomes obvious. Okay, this is a problem we should tackle and dive into. But without really listening to our clients, who at the end of the day, that's who we're serving, it's easy to get distracted and to maybe work on a problem that, isn't as big of a problem or need in the industry as it is. So I think the key is we try to make sure that we keep close with our partners and really listen to the feedback and listen to the problems that they're facing.
So in terms of listening to the consumers, maybe both prospects, current clients, legacy people, how do you tell us practically how do you do that? Is it a bunch of Zoom calls? Is there, I know AI is a huge thing right now. Is there AI put against those calls? Just talk to us practically. How are we collecting those consumer pain points?
Yeah, I mean, as much as AI is great for maybe, getting signals and catching ideas from calls and things, it's really maybe the only thing there is maybe to get some patterns. I'd say we really lean heavily on our sales team, our success team, our enterprise architects, the people that are kind of really working with the clients regularly to really bring that to the surface and bring that back to the team. They tend to find the really valuable insights and things that our clients are trying to solve. I would say the other thing is I still get my hands dirty from time to time. I actually spent this week, I went and visited a longtime client of ours and spent time with their team, and we just dug into things. And it amazed me how much they didn't even know some of the things that we could help them with. And I think we all walked out of that with a lot more knowledge and, marching orders of what we can do next together.
You bring up an interesting point that harkens me back to my operational days. And many times let's call it, you sit in the glass tower and you understand problems that are filtered through other people. And then when you actually get out of your chair and you go out and you sit in the client's chair, maybe you actually grab the mouse and, hey, walk me through this thing. It's interesting how much gets filtered out through those layers of the hierarchy. And that's not an indictment or a criticism of the hierarchy,
Yeah.
but and the problems are much more pronounced and much more clear in definition.
Yeah, no, it is. And what's exciting is many of the things we talk about, it's either, hey, we already have a solution, let me show you. Or B, like that is in our roadmap. Like I'm going to talk to you in 2 weeks about this and a month about this. And, give me maybe another month and a half here. And then like everything we just talked about is all coming. So that's the exciting part. But then it gives you that kind of fact check and reality of, are we implementing it in a way that it's going to be adopted, or are we implementing it in a way that is actually useful for the clients?
That makes a lot of sense. I so are there times, let's flip this one on its head just a second, if you're willing or want to share something like this, where we thought we heard a problem with absolute clarity, we put pure definition to it, we actually went out and built something, and then it didn't land so well. And maybe what it was, and then what did we miss in that signal where we built something that wasn't as well received as we thought it?
I mean, the funny one is I really would say it's attribution. Years and years,
There's
everyone's
nothing
like,
funny about that.
and so and solved attribution. Everyone says they would be so rich, everyone would use it. And it's, we solved attribution probably like 4 or 5 years ago. We
Yeah.
just now finally figured out how do we activate that data or how do we make it useful for our clients. So we went and we solved it. And then, we started to, install it and like, okay, here's the data. And then everyone's like, well, this is great. What do I do with it? And I was like, well, you guys said if I got this, you'd buy it? And so we realized that, like, okay, it isn't just solving attribution, but the good thing is that was a lot of work and a lot of foundation that we had to build to get us to where we are today. And we couldn't be where we are today without building that foundation. But I will say, like, hey, we solved attribution. And then it was, well, now what? You know?
Silence in the room. I will say this. I spent a lot of time on the operations side of the business and with Highly very short bit of time. But the big catalyst for me coming on board was seeing that attribution had actually been solved. It's something that literally banged my head against the wall for many, many, many years. And it seemed like every year there was a new phrase or a new thing. And somebody would try to make attribution of that. And I admittedly finally gave up on like, no one's going to solve this. Talk to me about what makes attribution so powerful on the Highly platform. Is there just one thing or a couple of little things that you could highlight that just make it so pronounced that it's like that no brainer you should have in your business?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think, the first thing we did was we just solved it, right? We solved
Mhm.
the data collection, the stitching, and putting together, a true prospect journey to understand, everything they ever touched. But just putting that together wasn't enough. Like I was mentioning, we kind of need to activate it. And I
Mhm.
think, the other thing we kind of ran into is most people in the industry are like, well, I'm just going to solve attribution by switching CRMs. And that's not the solution either, because the way that, our industry tools do attribution is the data is not rich enough. But then, okay, so now we have the rich data. We have the chronological thing that every ad a person never clicked, every time they ever went to your website, what was the source? When they converted, what source got them to create the lead. But then again, it goes to what do you do with it? So we've spent a lot of time pulling in more data and insights so we can actually go deep into attribution to help our clients with making sure that they're making the changes at the right time. So that way we're not having, you know, hey, I need more leads today kind of a problem.
That makes sense. What you're bringing to mind for me is our intelligence fabric in how we gather data together out of these disparate sources. We cleanse that data. We surface it in a way that is useful to a client so they can actually make an informed decision. How important do you think that information is? I mean, many times I would sit in Monday meetings, right? And people would argue and fuss and fight about source and why the numbers were different. And we spent about 20 minutes doing that and about 10 minutes on trying to make decisions based on that. How important is that? Well, it's an obvious answer, but I'd like to hear it from your perspective.
It is important. And I mean, I'd say one of the biggest things is you have to be able to accept change, right? You have to accept that maybe the reports that you look at every Monday are not the right reports. They don't
Mhm.
have the full picture. And so you have to be willing to change, and you have to be willing to look at a new set of data that is richer, that is more accurate, that can tell the story and give you those answers. I think the biggest problem too is a lot of times when you have those meetings, everyone goes, okay, well, everything's in property website. So it's like, oh, great. Well, you know what we should do? Let's just spend more money on our property website. Oh, wait, we can't. That's just a vehicle. That's not actually a source. And so the data in the industry is actually a lot like as simple as it is, it's a lot more complicated. We've got, internet listing services that provide leads directly. We've got, Google ads and other paid ads and paid media that we're driving to our website. Our listing services also sometimes drive leads to our website. You've got people just walking by your property and coming in and just, hey, I drive by this every day and that's the first time they touch you. So how do you take all this online, offline stuff that goes directly into the CRM and actually truly bucket it up in a way that's meaningful? But then also saying, okay, now that I understand how I get my leads in, I understand the costs for my leads, I understand how they're converting. Now we have to go look at it operationally and say, okay, well, how am I renewing? When are my leases expiring? And when do I actually need to spend to keep my pipeline healthy? I think many times the Monday meeting is occupancy is dipping. We need more leads. Well, at that point, it's already too late. You have to be able to set a target and track to it and track if you're performing. And if you're not tracking that performance ahead of time, it's too late. And then you're digging yourself out of a hole. You got to go start giving concessions and then, it's all downhill from there.
Yeah. I think what is most interesting about what you just said is that I think from a high level, operators, I'll put myself in this bucket, is I understand there is seasonality in
Hmm.
there just is. And for most assets, even student housing has seasons to it. They might be off from other seasons, traditional seasons. But what I hear you saying is, hey, we can go a layer deeper. We can get more accurate about that particular point in the season where you start to do ad spend or increase or decrease, right? Because we have really rich data to do that. Is that the right way to think about that?
Say so. It's definitely, of course, seasonality is a thing, and I think as an industry, we try to manage our lease expiration to better support the seasonality. But that's the exact idea. Is there's so much data that just a human and just an analyst can never really cobble it all together. Or
Yeah,
by the time they put it all together and assemble it all, they spend all their time assembling it, so they're not able to actually analyze it. But yeah, you have to go a layer deeper into it because sure, right, there's seasonality, but you're busier in the, spring and the summers than you are in the fall and the winters. But we should be able to be like proactive and pre-calculated about that ahead of time. And yes, it is the case that, because we know that the lead to lease, there's a lag. And then, if you look at the health of your funnel, how many leads have I already created? Are they sending the right signals to know that
right.
they have a high propensity to lease? Then yeah, I might have to start, buying my leads in May for July.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's what's most interesting to me is that it's, let's say, in the last 36 to 48 months, the industry has shifted a lot because the broader business economy, or broader economy rather, has put a lot of pressure on business, multifamily specifically in the area of muted rent growth, increasing expenses, and to the extent that you can get more nuanced with good data to make better decisions, better investment decisions, whether it be marketing dollars or any other dollars, you have to do it because the margins are getting thinner and thinner, and the broader economy doesn't look like it's shaping up anytime soon. So I'll just segue to a different question, maybe more product specific for Hyly. We have Halo, we have Helix, we have Hyly. Sorry, but they're Hayley. A lot of H's there.
Yeah.
But the three of those offerings coming together, what does that mean for the business if you're looking forward, say, the next 18 to 24 months with those three technologies or platforms coming together? What does that do for a consumer or a client?
Yeah. Well, Halo is really our data engine and our deep kind of data layer. On top of Halo, we've built, reporting and insights. We've built the ability to get that transparency, understand, the decisions that you want to make. What's exciting is Helix is our, moving from what I kind of call dashboards to decisions. So instead of okay, now I have all my data together. I can make a good decision. Well, why can't we provide a decision engine to help drive the decisions you should be thinking about making? And then not only drive those, once you do make them, measure the results of that decision so you can know if it was a good one or a bad one. And then we can continue to optimize and refine. What I think is really exciting about that is because that's on the marketing side. I think that's one of the few costs in multifamily we can kind of control and kind of pull levers. And so it's not always a, hey, let's, I mean, maybe it is, we can save a little bit. Maybe we can spend less, get better leads, or we can spend less during a time when our occupancy and pipelines are healthy, so we don't need to be spending as much because we know we can take a break and then ramp back up when it's needed. Or we just make sure that that spend is so efficient that we have more qualified leads than we've ever had before, which maybe then will increase that property's kind of demand a little bit, allow us to push on the rent some because we're getting the right people through the door. On the flip side, you've got, Haley, which is really about the nurturing AI leasing, being able to get someone through. Well, now that we have all of the insights from where people are coming from, how they're converting, and how they're behaving on the website, we can actually start to blend that data into our outreach. We can make things super hyper personalized or truly understand what's the next best step for someone. We can start to see the pattern of, okay, leads that come from a particular ILS or come from a particular advertising campaign tend to have this behavior before they lease. Let's try to push those next behaviors and be proactive to make them move faster.
I love that. Google wrote a paper many, many years ago, maybe it was a decade or more now, called the zero moment of truth. And to the extent that you can get, and really what their thesis was is that you want to be right there in the moment when a consumer is ready to make a decision and you want to have the right data in front of them to make that decision. So what I hear you saying is, hey, with all of this rich data that we're harvesting out of these sources, right? We're able to plug that into that nurturing conversation such that that moment of truth, when it's there and it's ready, the consumer goes, hey, this is easy. There's no friction here. I can just move forward in the process.
Yeah, it's truly taking the friction out. And you can't do that. I mean, most of the AI nurturing tools today are still the outreach is
Mhm.
still very trigger based. It's still very much this person wanted to move in. They haven't moved down the funnel. Their move-in date's coming up. Send outreach, hey, are you
Yeah.
still trying to move in 30 days? We'd love to help you. And all of that is very just kind of, cadence. And then, once someone responds, the AI tools do very well and they actually have an AI engagement, an AI response. But until you engage the AI, everything else outbound is still very, cadence like. And instead of it being like that, what we need to do is we need to deeply understand the behaviors of our consumers and our audiences. So we send them the right next thing. Sometimes that email, like, one of the things we're doing is we have, branded email campaigns that are more of a click to convert versus our leasing style emails, more human like, where someone responds. Well, if I see that a particular prospect is not responding to the leasing style emails, but they're clicking all the marketing ones, well, the next thing I need to serve them is a more of a marketing style. Hey, oh, you want to apply? This unit just became available. Click here versus the, hey, I know you were really interested in this specific unit and I would love to set you up with that tour. That prospect wants to go that path. Now, another prospect wants to engage and conversate with the AI, but you can read those signals, and then you can start to make sure you're driving people down their path of least resistance.
Right. It's their version of pick your own adventure, but it's really customized to them.
Yeah, we're giving them the pick your own adventure, but it is the adventure they would pick. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So I want to segue to something that you sort of touched on just a second ago, and maybe we can go just a layer deeper. Decision machines. Maybe potentially people outside of Highly don't know what decision machines are, or maybe if they've heard a version of this, it's like really big picture with Anthropic and ChatGPT and all these things. But our version of that, could you unpack that a little bit in terms of a definition of a decision machine and then a practical application of decision machine?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, a big part of it is taking the knowledge from us as the humans and the expert. I'm sure you've got, many of our clients have some really great, let's just say regional property managers out there that they wake up, they pull some reports, they know what to look at, and they know, okay, for this particular property, I need to go work with my marketing team on this particular problem. For this property, our leads aren't, or we're not converting on site. I might need to just go chat with the team, make sure they're trained up, or just make sure that there's, the property's clean and the model path is good. But those are things that they wake up every day. They have to kind of pull that data together and then decide what are the best things for me to maybe try to optimize or to work on in my day. Ideally, you would wake up every day with a digest of based on your portfolio and your kind of responsibilities, these are the best things you probably should do today. Or here's 5 decisions we think you should make. Do you agree with them? You need a human in the loop on some of these decisions just to make sure, oh wow, that's right. I understand why you want me to make that particular decision. And then again, you kind of move it through and you say, hey, like, okay, that decision's done. I agree with it. And then we track the results, right? Let's look at the property performance after we've made those particular decisions. So I'd say that's it kind of in a nutshell, but there's no reason that, AI can't be working every night on your behalf, understanding and putting together all the different data points that can tell us what's the next best thing we can do for a particular property.
It brought to mind, I saw this recently in my Robinhood account. There's a right? It does exactly what you're describing. It gives me a digest of what's happened this trading day, and it gives me information that I could potentially act on that night or the next morning. And
Yeah.
it takes a lot of the otherwise tedious analysis that you might do or have to do. Or to your point, I think with many organizations, you have these great regional managers, right? Or sometimes even great SVPs, but it's like a bus factor of one. If that person leaves your organization, get hit by a bus, God forbid, all that knowledge is gone. And the ability to make those decisions is just wiped out of the organization. With this, it's not. It's captured and systematized.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean you can just take, someone completely green and throw them into a role, that
Sure.
needs that kind of discipline. But what it can do is it can really make their quality of life much better. It can make it a lot easier for them to even do more, make more decisions each day and move things along. But that is really it. It's taking that strategy, and for your organization and over time, the decisions you choose to agree with or disagree with, the feedback loop, you kind of learn and train the system of like what was good, what was bad, what don't we like and why. And then also, the ability to, again, since we're measuring the result, being able to say, oh, wow, this really changed or impacted the property's performance. Let's now go analyze that against other properties in the portfolio and see if there's opportunity to do a similar adjustment.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. All right. So as we draw toward an end cap here, I love to talk about vision. I think the people like you that are in a position, Munish and others, who sit in a position of kind of seeing out around the bend. What do you see if you were to play this forward, say 5 years? It's an arbitrary number, but just some distance in the future. What do you see playing out in the way of intelligence fabric or decision machines and or what might be around the bend that no one's thinking about right now except for folks like you?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be necessary for a business. It's 5 years is almost hard to predict now because I even
Yeah.
joke, internally, we have our obviously our AI initiatives and stuff internally, and we just had our I think a 6 month anniversary of our AI pulse and all that. And I was listening to all the things we accomplished, and it was great. But some of the things we accomplished 6 months ago, we've already like abandoned, rebuilt, and move on because it's changed that fast that like something we did 6 months ago was so cutting edge that it's just antiquated today. But that's why you
It's
got to
true.
keep adapting and you got to keep looking forward. So I thought that was just, I was like, wow, but also good for us for like, just moving forward and continuing to move on. But I really think the biggest thing with the intelligence fabric and what we're trying to do is one, be forward looking, and then two, make sure that your data and your organization is positioned to be accelerate quickly. It's interesting. Our clients that we've worked with that have been with us for the last say 5+ years, they are moving so fast and they're running so much farther ahead of the industry because they already have that foundation and they already have that platform that they're able to be agile and they're able to get ahead. Whereas, clients we're bringing on now, it's going to take them time to kind of catch up. But once they catch up and they have that foundation and platform, they'll be off for the races as well. But I think the biggest thing is the data quality. So I think one of the challenges, we face sometimes is people are like, well, I already have all that data. But when you look at it, they really don't. There's a lot of missing attributes, or some of the stitching isn't done correctly, or they're simply just forklifting data from say a CRM or a PMS into a warehouse. They're not actually cleansing it. They're not adding to it. They're not collecting additional first party data. It doesn't connect back to their ad platforms. It doesn't connect back to their Google Analytics. So there's still a lot of, I'd say, like green grass or opportunity to get the data right or to get it better, because the last thing you want AI to do is to be running off, making recommendations and decisions on data that doesn't have isn't sound statistically. It doesn't have a good foundation. I mean, you throw, like I said, I joke about this again, but you ask AI, hey, I want to improve my cost per lease. It's going to say, great, move all of your money into your property website.
Right.
Okay, so does that mean I should just go pay my property website vendors more? Because there isn't more money I can move there, you know? Of course, you can drive more paid traffic there, but if you're not tracking that paid traffic that you're driving to the website, you don't know which paid traffic to buy.
Yeah, that's right. This is not a novel thought, but it brings to mind the variations of the statement of like, if you just put AI against bad systems or bad data, you're just going to get to a bad decision faster.
Yeah.
Right. So,
No, you really are. And then I think to go super forward looking, because we are building the data foundation, we're building the decision engines and the decision loops, we will have some really, I think, long term amazing playbooks and optimizations to where, we should be able to, impact properties very quickly. Provide that. I always kind of always try to say, hey, we need to really make our product provide day one value,
mm,
so, as soon as you're installing it, you're reaping some benefits. And, I really, truly believe with the feedback loops and as we grow, there's really going to be, really I call it kind of that data moat, but there really isn't going to be a system that can get up and running to really help with those decisions and those business plans for these properties as quickly as we can. And at the end of the day, if we can start to make sure that everything we're doing in marketing ties back to the asset and the asset performance in the business plan, I think that in the industry, we've never had, say, marketing ops and asset management in a very, very tight flywheel. I think they all have their own flywheels that are running very well. We're improving our marketing here, improving our ops here, improving asset management here, and they're all kind of talking to each other, and it's kind of working, but actually putting them all on the same flywheel and actually making every single, marketing decision you make, you can see the ripple impact to ops and the asset performance and vice versa. Anything we're doing on the asset side, you can see how it ripples back to the ops and even the marketing performance.
yeah, it's future is exciting because you're talking about bringing every sort of point of view to a table with a shared vocabulary and shared good, clean data to make well-informed decisions because we all are on the same team. We're all running toward the same goal, but many times we get off track because those things are broken. And
Yeah.
it'll be nice to bring that all together into a nice
And
package.
And I think, everyone is bringing their data in, but we're still bringing it in silos.
That's
So
right.
many times where we keep our asset management is separate from what we're doing with ops versus marketing. And then there's some overlap or, I'm looking at it, marketing's looking at it one way, operations is thinking about it another. And then, asset management is either thinking about it the same as one or the other versus, like you said, the shared vocabulary is going to be really good. And then again, a shared intelligence fabric that everyone can tap into and pull from, and then be on one kind of integrated and interleaved like playing field.
Definitely. Well, hey, I really appreciate you investing some time here today on the Intelligence Fabric podcast. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think would be valuable for our audience, both listeners and viewers, before we sign off here?
I feel like you covered a lot.
In a
Hopefully
short
I
amount of
didn't
time.
Hopefully I didn't rant too much. So yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about what we've covered today, and just excited to keep educating, educating the industry on I think what we can do from a data perspective, what we can do to better improve our asset performance, especially in a time right now where there's not a lot we can do with costs rising. Where can we, squeeze the next dollar? And I like I mentioned before, I truly believe that when you can get your marketing tied to the asset performance, you can finally start to understand when to spend, how much to spend, and that is one of the fewest levers I really think can be pulled, from a cost perspective. I can't go change how much you have to spend on your insurance.
Yeah, yeah,
You could bid between a couple of providers, but that's not something that you can control. I can make sure that your marketing funnel is healthy and that every dollar going in is being spent, the best that it can be.
definitely. Well, before we ultimately sign off, where can people reach out to you directly if they wanted to, and or learn more about everything that we've talked about today?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, we go to our website if you're interested. I mean, you can kind of just submit a form there, and of course, our sales team and stuff will follow up. I mean, if anyone has any personal questions for me or they want to reach out, absolutely feel free to. They could just email me. It's Robert and then at and then hy.ly. I love to have conversations and kind of make sure push the industry forward with anyone that's got thoughts. I'll put a little earmark. I'm not the fastest to respond to my emails because I'm typically heads down trying to solve the next problem, but definitely reach out. And, I love to have conversations and just answer any questions that people might have.
Robert, thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.